Welcome to Control 4 Driver Development Essentials. My name is Peter Casenza. In this video and the remaining T101 training modules, we'll dive much deeper into each of the respective template areas. We'll do this within the driver editor environment and in an ordered manner that demonstrates good driver development practices. We'll continue to use the IP camera template and populate all of the template components which are applicable to creating an IP camera driver. If you haven't yet had the opportunity to do so, we recommend watching the T101 Module 1 and 2 training videos. Reviewing that content will ensure that you get the most from this video. As in our prior videos, we'll continue to work with the IP camera template. Let's start by opening the template from within Driver Editor. Note that once again we're running Driver Editor in single driver mode for demonstration purposes. To open the template, click File, followed by New. This will display all of the currently available templates. Here is our camera template. Double-clicking it will load the template into the Driver Editor environment. The template opens by default to the Main tab. In our previous videos, we covered the first three tabs on the toolbar: Main, Proxies, and Capabilities. In this video, we'll examine the Configuration and Connection tabs. If we click on the Configuration tab, the following screen is displayed. The Configuration tab offers the ability to configure numerous aspects of your driver. While all of the contents of this tab aren't necessarily applicable to creating an IP camera driver, let's take a few moments to review the configuration points that are available to us, as they will become useful in future videos. The first section you'll notice is dedicated to power management. These settings are primarily used by IR-controlled devices, and they allow you to easily configure how a device powers on, as well as any timing settings needed during the powering on cycle. If we were creating a driver for a device that was controlled with a serial connection, the serial port settings area would be very useful. Here you can easily enter all of the RS-232 connection parameters that your device will need. The RF cloud area allows you to assign an appropriate RF cloud profile to your driver. If your driver happens to use an RF feature set that is listed in this section, you'll need to select it in order for your driver to function properly. The Composer category does have relevance to our camera driver. It allows you to designate where your driver will reside in the Composer Pro driver area. The logical selection for our IP camera driver would be Cameras. As mentioned, the Configuration tab isn't the most applicable area of Driver Editor when working with an IP camera driver. However, it provides a convenient way to populate the schema found in the Config section of a driver. As we progress into the template-specific videos, we'll provide examples of the Configuration tab being used extensively when creating template-based drivers. Now, let's move on to an area of Driver Editor that is significantly more applicable to our IP camera driver, the Connections tab. The Connections tab makes it easy to modify the schema found in the Connections section of our IP camera driver. Before we get into the details of the Connections tab, it is important to understand the role connections play in the Control 4 system. Connections are used to create bindings within the Control 4 project. These are the connections made available in Composer Pro under the Connections area. Connections vary in type, such as room connections, audio-video connections, and network connections. For example, if our IP camera communicates over TCP/IP, we need to create a connection for it here. Similarly, if we were creating a driver for a receiver, all of the audio and video connections that the device supports would need to be created in this area of Driver Editor. Failing to create the connections here will result in them being unavailable in Composer Pro. If you would like to review more specific information regarding connections and how they operate within the Control4 system, please see the Level 300 Module 3 Driver Development Training video. You can see that our template has provided two predefined IP camera connections for us. Let's first look at the connection named Camera. If we hover over the connection name, we can see the supporting schema behind it. You'll notice that the binding ID value is, by default, the same value as the proxy binding ID we discussed in our last video. Its value is 5001. Let's use the Edit Connection feature to look at the other elements that make up this particular connection's content. If we double-click on the connection name, the Edit Connection screen is displayed. The first entry we see is the connection type. This particular connection is a proxy connection to the IP camera proxy, so proxy is selected. This connection will bind our camera driver to the IP camera proxy. As we alluded to earlier, there are other connection types used in the Control4 system. You can see from the list of available options, connection types supported include control, audio, video, network, and room. The connections you'll need will be dictated by the device for which you are creating a driver. For example, while our IP camera driver needs only proxy and network connections, an audio-video receiver may use all of these connection types. Next, we see the connection's ID value. It's 5001. Remember our proxy binding ID value? It was 5001 as well. That's significant as these values need to be the same in order for our connection to successfully bind. Then we see the connection's name field. As we saw in the driver editor window, the name Camera has been used. This is followed by the facing field. This is a read-only field that will display the physical location of the connection on a device. It is only applicable to older drivers that include this element. This field is no longer applicable to new driver development. Next, we can see that the hidden box has been populated. Since this is a proxy connection, we really don't want it represented in the Composer Pro UI. It is assumed that the IP camera driver is bound to the IP camera proxy, so we'll hide the connection information here. Finally, the connection class is assigned in the Classes box. As you can see, Camera is selected. The connection class is related to the connection type. Here we see the camera class selected as we are using the camera proxy. You'll notice that the connection classes listed are all proxies. Now, let's look at the second connection provided in the IP camera template to see how some of the other connection fields are used. Notice the connection ID value. It is 6001. Similar to our previous connection example, which used 5001 for a proxy connection, 6001 falls in the range for network type connections. Next, we can see that the consumer and line level boxes are populated. The consumer box is populated by default, and it indicates that this connection is an input-based connection. Our camera has a physical TCP/IP input that this connection represents. If we were creating a connection that was output-based, the consumer box would be unchecked. Likewise, the line level box is populated as well. This box is populated when the signal associated with the connection does not require any form of amplification. You should also notice that this connection has the hidden checkbox unpopulated. We want Composer Pro users to not only be able to see this connection, but assign it when needed. Finally, the Classes box displays all of the supported network connection classes available. Since this is a TCP/IP connection, TCP is selected. Note the control connection classes listed here. They are all network-based. The connection classes displayed are based upon the connection type that is selected. For example, if video is the selected connection type, you will only see classes that pertain to video signals. Up to this point, we've used the driver editor environment to examine the main, proxy, capabilities, configuration, and connection content of the supplied camera driver template. Hopefully you have found these areas of the driver template rather straightforward. Our next video will increase in complexity as we'll examine the contents of the Codes and Commands tab for the camera driver template.